and good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you so much to Muhamad for this opportunity to share something on the topic. So let me get to my slide. And slideshow. Okay, so I hope everyone can see my slide now. Okay, so there are three main things that I'm going to share today from my perspective, as well as from the latest evidence and the current literatures. So hopefully that these three things will be covered well in a simpler way. Hopefully that everybody can grasp the main points that I'm trying to deliver today. So basically, I'm going to reflect on what the main trends that lead to the current situation and how that's influenced higher education. And then what are the strategies, the potential strategies to humanize technology in higher education. And lastly, perhaps I would like to share something that a framework on how to humanize technology in higher education based on Sustainability Development Goals number 4. So I hope that these three areas will be covering most of the angle when we are talking about humanizing technology in higher education. If you're looking at the future, basically before the COVID, we're quite relaxed. We're quite, there's no major things happening to us in higher education. But when it comes to pandemic, so basically we are kept in unready. I think there is something unprepared. So basically the future is full of uncertainty, definitely, and it's volatile, complex, and ambiguous. So this is a VUCA world that we are having now, and trying to predict precisely is very, very difficult. But we are trying to see the patterns or the trends that can help us to see what kind of the future will be likely happening in our higher education. And then if you're looking at one of the documents from Ministry of Higher Education, which is Malaysian Future Higher Education Scenarios for Industrial Revolution and Beyond, that was published in 2018, before, I think almost 2 years before the pandemic comes, they already predict something. They already predicted something, which is into 4 main scenarios. They call it human university, urban university, utilitarian, adaptive, with the two major, pool, which is techno-driven higher education, and the other one is society-driven education, and the player is the human and robot, which means the artificial intelligence. If you're looking at the current situation now, it's a techno. Basically, we are urbanization of higher education, meaning that a lot of technology is being used so far during the pandemic, especially, and if we are not careful enough to use the technology, maybe it could turn into utilitarian, which is education without soul, because we are just using technology without the human touch, but very less human touch to educate, to instill values to our future graduates. So there's something that has been predicted in 2018 by Ministry of Higher Education, and now we are talking about post-pandemic, even though we are not yet post-pandemic, but what could happen? What could happen, and how can we do something to ensure that we are ready for the post-pandemic? And the topic today is about technology in higher education. And if you go through the history of technology, and particularly related to whatever gadgets that we are using now, so starting from 1960 is basically this whiteboard, invented to replace the chalkboard. So we are still using the whiteboard, even though in the 21st century we are still using. And then come the computer, and then the first Apple something in 1980 something, CD-ROM, and then if you still remember the smart board, still remember smart board, in USM also we have bought smart board before, and now not smart anymore. And then we have internet come into the picture in 1990, but later on, the wireless, everything come into the 2000, the early 21st century. And if you're looking at the rise of social media, you still remember the Friendster, MySpace, and I think Friendster and MySpace already not existing, I think. Just a Facebook and Twitter, are still remaining relevant, but there are so many other social medias coming into the picture. And then in 2013, one of the studies in US, they reported that 90% of students under the age of 18 have access to mobile technology. You can see that how far that technology has been with us and how they influence our way of life. And looking at the trends in terms of the technology, what's happening in the context of higher education, basically, 1980, most of the ICT-related things is needed to work with the technical skill. So basically, it's helping technical skill. And then later on, in 1990, when the widespread of the internet providers being presence in our life, so and until now, I think based on the figure that I'm showing you, it's quite small, but in 2019, 84% of the population have the access to the internet audience. So basically, we are quite connected in Malaysia, and particularly in the West is even more connected. And in early of 21st century, we can see that now people are creating content. Content creation skill with the technology is becoming more and more popular, and even can make money from that. For 21st century, 2000, because of the advancement of the mobile technology, social media, video streaming, and many other things. Even now, AI, artificial intelligence, is coming to us. And this, if look at the higher education, is where the open access journal was started. 2000. And if you look into 2013, because of the evolution of ICT so advanced, and the fourth industrial revolution come to the picture, and nowadays I think gadget is something, it is not something that something that we want, but basically it's a need already. Without that, it's a bit difficult, or we feel something loose from our sides. And early 2020, or maybe it was started in 2019 about the COVID, but we felt that early 2020, whereby the whole higher education has been changed, to online. And this is something what we are doing right now as well, as a result of the pandemic, because we need to keep the social distance. We need to have a personal space because we cannot roaming around too much because of the pandemic. If you have a group activity, it's very small. I think it's much smaller than before pandemic, and we leverage a lot on digital platforms. And now digital platform, we have so many digital platforms. We are not used to that before, but now we are quite used to those digital platforms to communicate, to deliver, to continue the education and many other things we are doing, even for the conference and webinar like this. And then online and distance learning becoming more popular right now and getting momentum from time to time. And we are, used to that online and distance learning. So, this is quite the trend. And then if you're looking at dissect further into categories, so basically before 1980, we are less ICT, I would say. And then we are ICT related in the middle 1980 to 2010, but now we are ICT dependent. So basically, when it comes to ICT dependent, it means that this has a lot of influence on the way, on how we do daily, particularly in higher education. So this is the true story about us right now. And definitely, with that, since we are ICT related, we are using a lot of digital things to get our work. So basically, digitization is at our door, basically, because of this transformation. So a lot of things through digital. So basically, the adoption of information and communication technologies is something we consider as the interconnected environment that enables student digital learning, as well as the teachers, we are teaching them digitally. So I think if you're looking at all these aspects, this link fosters a quality, comprehensive, and transformative education that affects content and learning outcomes that we deliver to the students, as well as the students receive from what we have delivered to them. So I think digitization is something that we cannot avoid, but we need to embrace and to adapt with that. And if you're looking at higher education, most of domains of higher education has been influenced by digitization, particularly in the pandemic. So we can see that now the curriculum design development. Previously, we are just thinking about face-to-face or maybe physically, or maybe a contact physically. And now we need to think how to develop curriculum that that can be delivered through digital platforms, and then what kind of assessment that we can do online, how best we can deliver teaching and learning through online, how we develop our faculty, what the e-professionalism and e-ethics. Now, it's not only normal ethics, but now e-professionalism is coming to the picture, and the teacher and student well-being in the digital world is being affected very much. We can learn from the pandemic. We can see that a lot of things has changed, and the quality assurance when we are into the digital world. I think there is a lot of things need to be discussed, but at least we know that every aspect of higher education has been affected. And if you're looking back, before the pandemic, basically, literature said, or maybe a survey said that we are lacking of digital culture and training. So this is the biggest challenge when we want to go for digital education. So, and I think that is something that we felt, when the pandemic comes to us, we are not prepared. We are not prepared, and a lot of hassle, a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulties that are happening to our members. Maybe the students are digital native, we call, because they are used to it, but the teachers, and it seems that having difficulty to adopt, but at the end of the day, hopefully, they are adopting right now. And our interesting study, I think it's a report from Higher Education Commission in May 2020, say that we have received a lesson in how to cope with uncertainty, which is a pandemic. And at the end of the day, it's not about striving for control. We are, sometimes it's beyond our control, but we need to develop resilience, wisdom, creativity, inclusion, diversity to adapt with whatever we are facing right now. So I think now let's move from here. And then if you're looking at the report in 2018, so basically if higher education to be in the digital era, these are 4 things that we need to consider. One is we need to ensure that the symbiotic relationship between human and technology, either at individual level or organization level. So both sides must be ready. So this human-technology relation must be developed. The second part is about technology-enhanced education. I think Dr. Bhavani and Dr. Paul will talking a lot about technology-enhanced tool afterward. Perhaps this is something that they will dive into this topic, and we can look at how it is afterward. We need to leverage on whatever technology for personalized and self-deterministic education to a better quality of life and work-life balance. And value-driven education is something that is very important, because if we just deliver without incorporating or instilling the values during the online education, so at the end of the day, maybe education without soul will happening. So we want to avoid that. And definitely, we are going for sustainable education regardless of whatever environment we have. And there are 4 things that, there are 4 main themes when we are talking about strategies to humanize technology in higher education. One side is humanizing learning institution. What are the strategies being proposed? One is we need to put value-based and competency-based as a core curriculum. So I think it's something we need to think about it. And well-being strategies in higher education is something we need to put into our system as well. So I will talk more about that afterward. And then leveraging improvisation of higher education means that leverage on the technology to ensure that higher education still continue as before. So there are 4 strategies here. First is future-ready curriculum must be ready. Future-ready credential model, I will share something about that as well. And then we need to ensure that the digital fluency and accuracy among students, among staff, and among the teachers are well kept. And the future economic readiness, because to have all these digital tools, we need to be economically stable. So I think the well-being of the financial institution is important. I will share something on that as well afterward. And then revitalizing education ecosystem, there are three things here. We need to rethink the role of higher education, because when the world changes, we need to have a different set of role of higher education to catch with that. And then a new deal on learner diversity, I will share something as well. Professionalized teaching workforce, something that I will talk a little bit more afterward. And education for changing world. So there are three set of strategies. We need to ensure that resilient higher education institution is there, at least a framework. A responsive policy and decision making must be there as well, because the leaders must decide quickly and they need to be agile. And the future job readiness, even though it's online, but we need to ensure that whatever we put in the curriculum or in the program, make them ready for the world that they will be facing once they graduated from higher education. So let's go one by one. So the main key for the value-based and competency-based, is bringing human aspect into digital education. So how to do that? Perhaps I will show you an example afterward. So like it or not like it, I think we need to create curriculum beyond traditional and conventional exam-based. I think we need to move from there to something different. We think a new model of higher education. We need to establish outcome-based performance contracts. We need to really know what we want them to achieve at the end of the day. And we need to enhance infusion of falsafah kebangsaan into higher education, because it's about treating the human being as a person that contributes to the nation, and there will be the nations later. So there is something that I would like to share, a new initiative that has been published by Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Higher Education. They call it Excel, Exponential Learning and Competency-Based Education Landscape. And what are the building blocks of this Excel? Basically, humanizing education and future-proofing higher education. One is the pillar is we need to adapt with the sustainable goal, SDG, UNESCO 4 pillars of learning, framework of shared prosperity vision, national education blueprint, and the most important here is the experiential learning. Even though it's online, or maybe you call it the digital education, but the experiential learning part must not be compromised. And the competency-based learning is something that we need to ensure that whatever it is, they achieve the competency that they need to achieve at the end of the program. So it must be student-centered, and then it must be based on the outcome. And at the end of the day, the mastery of the competency is most important. And hopefully with all this will lead to the acquisition of 10 C skills for resilient education in the graduate, so that they become a person that contributes to the nation later on. And there are 10 C there: communication, collaboration, thinking, creative, computational thinking, complex, problem solving, cognitive, cross-culture. I think is very important. Career and learning, but the most important, I think, is coping and well-being skills. So I think how I understand, I really, think that coping and well-being skill is important. And now, the second part is well-being strategies and education. And we are talking about well-being strategy. It must be from the individual to organization. And if the organization level, the alignment between the government policy with the well-promotion and education must be there. And then we need to establish a framework to promote well-being to our institution. And maybe there are certain things that we need to redesign to support well-being in our institution. And one of the books that I really love to read and to share with everyone is the Well-being in Education. And there are four main things that have been summarized out of this book. Is required times. To promote, we require times. We need to give a good time, educate time for our staff, our students, for our lecturers, to ensure that they are not stressed out during, the digital. Because when digital, a lot of preparation required. The culture must be developed properly. The opportunity for them, if they are not prepared, they need to have opportunity to upscale and to upgrade the skill in terms of the digital skill. And definitely we need to see the individual strengths, because everybody have their own strengths, and not only strength, they also have weaknesses that need to be addressed, in particular related to the digital skill. And these are four overriding elements that will influence the well-being achievement in higher education and subsequently or indirectly to their life in general. I think there is something that we need to have in our mind when we are trying to humanizing technology in higher education. And if we are looking detailed framework, just I would like to highlight, in addition to time, culture, opportunity, and strength, so we need to ensure that the social connectedness there, environment must be conducive enough, even though it's on our digital learning environments. Physically, we need to support them because there are certain hardware we need to provide for the staff, for the teachers, for the students to ensure they are able to be in a digital world properly and psychologically must be supported. And all this, if you are talking about physical and digital learning environment, the well-being must be considered in the learning outcome so that at the end of the day, they will attain the competency, not only the core competency related to the program, but the competency for them to be a person with a good well-being. And I would like to highlight something in the digital era. We call it the digital well-being because usually when we talk about well-being, it's about the physical, the face-to-face contact. But in digital well-being, they're talking about the impact that digital technologies have had on the well-being and on the state where the well-being is maintained because of the environment from the digital overabundance, which in a way that we call it techno-stress, and that will cause a lot more stress because they are continuously engaged with the digital world through so many gadgets, and in particularly when the digital society is becoming more and more prominent. I think there is something we need to think, and then similar to the well-being in the face-to-face concept. So we are talking about mental, intellectual, emotional, physical, spiritual, professional. At the end of the day, how this digital well-being, will be able to help them to ensure the mental, intellectual, emotional, physical, spiritual, professional well-being will be maintained. So I think there is something that we need to think when we are talking about humanizing technology. We need to use the technology to promote well-being even in the digital world. And this is one of the a kind of proposal, the intervention framework. If you are talking about teach and learn, which is related to social well-being concerning into education, so we need to somehow humanize our online learning, consider the loads, consider the time, give a flexibility, and something that they can adapt to the teaching in the online world. And the education must be equitable, and so on and so forth. I think there's a kind of just examples, and you can always, every higher education can always have your own versions of systems that will support your all the members' well-being. In terms of future-ready curriculum, I think we need to somehow align our teaching, learning, and assessment approach with the technology advancement. There is no way out for that. I think it's not an option. We need to be with that. And then somehow we need to redesign our academic program that align with the digital era, because the delivery must be different from the conventional or the traditional way of delivering our academic program. And then we need to create a framework for continuous curriculum review and improvement in the digital era. I think if you reflect back, the curriculum goals is one is about enhanced capabilities, optimize well-being, and protect public. The most important is enhance capability, protect public, and hopefully we are producing someone with a good well-being when they graduated from our education. And if you're looking at the balance between whatever we have now, current curriculum, what are the future-ready curriculum attributes, I think this is something that we need to think. If you really look at humanizing, we need to consider all these, attributes of future-ready curriculum. And I would like to share something that in USM, we call it we lead curriculum attribute. So basically this framework or this attribute was coined during the pandemic when we are talking about how can we make sure that our curriculums are future-ready even in the pandemic. So we lead is a USM motto. So what is W? W is world ready. It means that whatever the curriculum we design, it must make sure that the graduate is world ready, regardless of the situation. And E is about e-learning and teaching. So basically, a curriculum has technology versatility and deliver fundamental knowledge through digital platforms. So it is something that to ensure that the curriculum is ready and not going to be affected so much by the disruptions from the technology. And learner-centered is a must, is very fundamental. Experiential inquiry-based learning is something that we will look at the curriculum. And then altruism-oriented. So this is quite interesting because the curriculum must inculcate the values to our students, in particular related to the socio-economic, gender equality, so that they know what is it in all the curriculum. And last but not least is distributed learning and assessment. So assessment and learning can happen at any time. It's not depending on location. So this really, and if you're looking at the medical education, is from my area. So basically we are talking about personalized medication. And interestingly, when it comes to the technology, so basically simulation-based preparation for practice, actual media and online support is a must in our, in the curriculum. I think these are examples of attributes of future-ready curriculum that might stand out when even in the pandemic, if we have all these kind of features in our curriculums. And future-ready credentialing model, I think definitely we need to align whatever the national standard and credential framework to our way of designing of our assessment. And I would like to share you a new credential framework that beyond conventional exam-based approach. And this framework basically was recommended by UNESCO in 2018, so before the COVID. But I think because of used to the conventional internship, we are not so aware of this. But I would like to highlight here, there is a digital credentialing framework proposed by UNESCO, and the main things that about this digital credentialing ecosystem is, one is standards, that is referring to whatever the quality assurance agency has been set, and then we need to identify the users of credential, which is our students, or maybe even when we're talking about the student, there are conventional and non-conventional students, new hybrid students, and who is the providers of that, who is going to award quality assurance that are trusted and authenticated to have that kind of credentialing, and then who is going to evaluate for the continuous improvement, and who is going to verify. So all these elements in that system. So I'll really recommend for you to read the document in detail so that certain things can be adopted into our digital credentials ecosystem in our own higher institution. And digital fluency and literacy, I think it is something a must. I think so, because without this, I think it's very difficult for us to move with the digital, digital education. And one of the framework that I would like to share with you from the European, the framework was published 2017, even before the pandemic. So basically, they are looking at digital competence of educators. So what are the educators' professional competencies that relate to digital? What are the pedagogic competencies related to digital? And what's learners' competency related to digital? And if you go deep dive into detail, in summary, these are the competences that was put inside that framework. For example, here, if you're talking about educator professional competence related to digital, is need to have organization communication. It's very important. Professional collaboration must be there. Reflective practice is super important, particularly in the digital education. And then digital CPD is not only specific to any CPD, but digital continuous professional development. If you're looking at the pedagogic competency, the digital resources, how we have to conduct our assessment for online, what are the teaching learning strategies for digital, how to empower learners, and how to facilitate learners' digital competency at the same time. I think this framework is, I would recommend, please have a look at this framework in detail, and it is available online without any fees. It's open access basically. So please have a read and have an idea on how to develop your own framework from based on this framework. And future academic readiness, I think whatever it is, financial well-being is super important to ensure that the continuity of our higher education, either traditional higher education or even in the digital higher education. And I would like to just attract your attention on the Malaysia Digital Economy Blueprint, and we can learn a lot from this. Even though it's for the academic planning blueprint for the Malaysian, but if you're looking at the team 1, team 2, and the team 3 is basically very much applicable to us as well. For example, drive digital transformation in higher education. Even though it's public sector, but it is in higher education. Both economic competence through digitalization, I think this is important in higher education as well. Build enabling digital infrastructure, yes, it is very important in our setting. Build agile, competent digital talent, definitely. In higher education, we need to have digital talent, particularly the teachers. Inclusive digital society, yes, definitely. In higher education, we need to ensure that our higher education society are digitally oriented and competent, and build trusted, secure, and ethical digital environment. So all this basically, even though is the concept is for the academic blueprint for Malaysia, but if you're looking at reflect back into our education, it is very much applicable and practical to us as well. So please have a look as well. And rethinking the role of higher education. When it comes to a pandemic, we were struck and we were thinking about, so what kind of roles of higher education should be? So, and if you're looking at the rules, definitely roles of university teachers must be changed as well. And then what will be the emerging competence of graduate need to be there to ensure they can learn properly in the digital world, and alternative modes of teaching and learning delivery. So I think it is something that is not the conventional and traditional way right now, but is more on alternative mode of that. Changing the content and syllabus structure and how we deliver the content syllabus, I think it has been changed quite a lot since we faced with pandemic. Alternative modes of assessment, there's no longer face-to-face in the hall, and then student takes paper out, paper in, and sending paper. But now is most of the digital examinations, and then shift in the government education policy. We can see that we have seen there are significant numbers of government education policy has been changed due to the pandemic, and that's, I think, is a positive way to unlock certain things that was not possible before. And definitely online learning is something that we are facing right now. So I think I do not want to touch more about it because we are experiencing it and we understand it well. But I would like to share a study that was published in 2021 about online learning and learning experience, because learning experience usually we are talking about face-to-face, but in the online learning experience exists as well. So basically, benefits, definitely. When you go for online, there's a time saving, increased conversation, more study resources given, and closer to family support. So this is something that was reported by the research. But we need to think about the enablers to ensure that the learning experience through online learning is still maintained. So first, the learners itself, they need to have certain level of self-regulation for their learning. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. The home environment, if you have a very good environment, conducive environment for learning is okay, but most of us not so fortunate to have that kind of conducive environment, particularly when you have many siblings who are learning and the space is very limited. So I think that can somehow give unwanted effects to the learning of the students in that kind of environment. Having one device, not everybody afford to get a good device. Sometimes it's very minimal with certain things, and most important is stable internet connection. Even though it's almost 84% and above now have internet coverage, at least at home, but the stability of the internet connection is something really matters. But even now, sometimes we got a lot of issues with the internet connection. And from the educator side, so I think educator must be prepared with the competency that was mentioned in the European framework. I think it is very important. So we need to train our educators. And institution, so I think institution also need to provide good internet for educators and support for disadvantaged students to ensure that the teachers, the educators and the students have access to the relevant websites, resources, as well as the support system that will facilitate the learning experience through online learning. And disadvantage, definitely, if you're looking at those who are professional like medical program, so less clinical and practical experience because you don't have that kind of interaction with the patient, spend more time when having internet problem, lack of focus, and sometimes when related to kinesthetic learners, so it will be they will be at an advantage, and sometimes it's very costly because you need to buy the internet data. Interruption if the internet is down, reduce motivation because when we engage with students, even though online learning is not so bad, but they like to see the educators face to face, and definitely the physical impact, dry eyes, back pain, and other things. So I think we need to consider all this if you are talking about humanizing technology in higher education. And we're talking about learning experience. Yeah, definitely we need to create positive learning experience, create learning synergies, and hopefully that will enhance capability of graduates to have to gain what the competency they require to carry out the responsibility in the future. And the two things I would like to emphasize here is we need to focus on the learning evidence for the mastery and then prevent unnecessary load whenever necessary. I think this is something that we need to focus about the learning experience. And a new deal on the learner's diversity. Now, I would like to attract you to I think the latest report from the UNESCO team about learning for flexible learning pathway in higher education. I think soon will be available online. You can have access there. But what I would like to highlight is the situation has led to a greater diversity of learners. Remember that entering the system, there are conventional learners and there are non-conventional learners. I think we need to address both. And in this context, higher education is increasingly expected to adapt to different learning needs. So if you want to humanize, it means that the pathway for getting into education, pathway of getting out education, pathway for getting through higher education must be flexible enough. I think there is something that we need to think if you are talking about digital world in higher education and how to humanize the technology. So there is something we need to think ahead to ensure that what we are doing is facilitating the human potential development. And the blended higher education, the changing roles of learners and teachers to humanize, we are quite used to this, isn't it, right now? Asynchronous, synchronous, and campus. So this is something that now we are doing. I think, yeah, most of higher education right now is doing this. Certain things that we can deliver through synchronous so that we can provide certain opportunity for the students and certain flexibility to the student, the tutors to deliver the education. And when it comes to the synchronous, so basically is the where the student will have a face-to-face session with the educators through online platform. And those who are having certain skills that they need to develop, there are certain practical things that they need to do. So this is where the campus is providing them with all this experience. So basically all this the blended way of approach to higher education is gaining momentum regardless of the field right now. Yes, we have learned about blended learning previously before COVID, but not everybody is subscribed to that. But nowadays, I think most of higher education are doing this. I think this, kind of a normal thing that's happening. But we need to ensure that whatever we put, it must be by design, not by chance. And from one of the universities, they now reported that if you use blended learning, because they use it before COVID, and they say that it works like a vaccine, enabling education resilience and facilitating the sustainability of the student learning process. So I think this statement is quite powerful, and I think regardless of the field, including the medical, we are now moving to a blended learning. And professionalized teacher workforce, I think this is something that we really need to take care of, because our teachers are mostly expert content. They are not professional teachers. So basically, we need to have a kind of training to ensure that they are continuously being upgraded. And then to do that, we need to have a framework, a proper framework, so that everybody are toward achieving certain digital skill and digital competencies. And we need to have the system to support that, in particular, the well-being skill. And we refer back to the thing that we used to do as academic. So basically, there is something when we contact with the students, we mentor, learning facilitator, on-the-job role model before the COVID. And then you also are the content experts who are being a teacher model, a role model, lecturer who is giving and delivering the information, and clinical or practical teachers in our own setting. And then later on, student additions. Even before the COVID, we're already thinking about how we organize our resources, how we produce our study guide to the student, and how do we prepare or how we create our resource material to students. And the teaching experts, we assess students, we evaluate our curriculum, and we plan our curriculum. But when it comes to the digital world, the same role, but you need to infuse with the digital skills. How are we going to do e-mentoring? How do we facilitate our learning through electronic medium, and so on and so forth? I think there is something that same roles, but now in a different world. The role will be same, but now is in different learning environment, which is digital learning environment. And the keywords here about empowering our staff is faculty development. I think since now we have so many tools, and we have so many processes to develop staff in a way we did not conceive possible or acceptable before COVID. But now it's getting a kind of a normal thing for us to have this kind of digital staff development. I think so. We need to capitalize on this. So hopefully we can deliver our online staff development as much as possible. But please beware, utilizing technology can potentially increase access to online learning. Yes, definitely. But when not implemented carefully, it can magnify inequities, particularly those of staff who are busy, do not have so much time, and sometimes because of the nature of their jobs, they are at a disadvantage. So I think the way we carry out our online study must consider all this, the nature of our works, particularly the staff works. Sometimes because they are too busy, they want to join, but because the timing, the schedule, or the arrangement is not suitable for their, for the nature of their work, so that they always miss the opportunities to get involved with the online staff development. Resilient higher education institution, yeah, definitely. I think higher education must be resilient enough, and therefore create a resilient education framework that aligns with the future change. I will share you something on the framework that was proposed by Higher Education Commission and digitalized and technology enhanced learning and education institution. I think it is very, very much important right now, and Dr. Paul and Dr. Bhavani will be speaking about this soon. Okay, so when we talk about resilient, I think whatever it is, we need to have a control. It means that stay composed and be controlled in any universities. Involvement means that we are committed to deal with the universities. We have our commitment to that. And resourceful, I think we need to find appropriate solution from whatever available resources allow us to deal with that. And growth able to bounce back and grow stronger from the adversity. I think these are 4 resilient features either an individual or organization should have. And one of the framework that I love to share is from this. So basically, the short-term ensure academic continuity, I think we have passed that one for the past 1 year. And then now we are looking at medium-term, looking for opportunity to reform the system, meaning that you can always, move a delivery of programs to the welfare, capacity building of staff, resource digital technology, and so on and so forth. I think you can put on any other list that relevant to your institution. And long term, something that looking at the innovation and transformation of our program to ensure that if we are facing the same situation in the future, we are not, we are not kept within the traps of being not prepared. I think it is something that we learned so far. So hopefully this framework can give some ideas of what should be there in terms of building resilience in higher education. So ensure that everybody being treated well. And responsible policy and decision making. One of the framework that I would like to share with you in this regard, this organizational resilience framework, based on the capability-based conceptualization. I think we have learned now. We have the prior knowledge now, yes, based on our 2 years experience. Now we can anticipate what kind of thing that we are going to face, and we already cope with that. And now if, let's say, the situation is happening in the future, we know what to do. And adaptation to that, reflection learning, and so that whatever we have, we can go back and do something, and hopefully we can deal better with ourselves as well with the environment if that happens in the future. So I think the framework is, I believe that is very useful for us to look at, particularly the leaders, because the leaders and the student-centric must come in tango. The leaders should see that what is a new pedagogy. And definitely at this moment, blended learning is the preferred mode, definitely. The technology is something that we cannot avoid, we need to embrace. And the common resources now, we can see what we can have a look at what are the available open education resources that we can use for our education. Sometimes with the common resources, we can reduce the economic and the financial implication on our planning. Community of practice, we must ensure that we develop the community of practice for the purpose and then prepare for labor market, particularly for the student that we are producing through this system, maybe through the system. So this is a continuous efforts and evaluation so that we can improve from time to time. So I think these kind of things will make human, I think the technology is more humane to us. And the last part of the strategy is future job readiness. Definitely, I think if you're looking at the future job readiness, special learning that I said earlier, I think there is a framework that aiming to prepare students for the future, regardless of the situation. And if you're looking at top 10 skills, there is something that we are talking about, and then we need to prepare the student regardless of our situation. And then there is where the technology can help us to achieve this. And I would just like to highlight the Excel framework that was launched by KPT, in which if you are moving toward humanizing technology in higher education, we must consider all this, how this technology will facilitate the delivery of our education through to achieve all these important skills, and still putting the values on our education. It's not about education without soul, but education with soul, even though in the technology and in the technology-driven era. And if you're looking at SDG, okay, so we are talking the potential strategies, how can the fourth sustainable development goals come to the picture in higher education in digital era? So because whenever the environment changes, it doesn't matter. But the most thing that matters most is these three parts, inclusivity, diversity, and equity. So we need to ensure that either in campus or online or virtual, if there's something virtual, we need to ensure one is student diversity are taken into account to facilitate the attainment of competency. It doesn't matter campus or online, so we must ensure that because it's about diversity. They acknowledge and recognize the diversity of the student. In fact, not only student, the teachers as well. When the teachers delivering the educational content to the student, and then we need to ensure that all students have the access to education opportunities and resources to support the attainment of competency. I think this is why we call equal access to opportunities for the students, so that they can attain the expected competency. And last but not least, all students have the opportunity to attain the intended competency to function as competent professionals, regardless of personal and socio-economic circumstances. I think this is the diversity, inclusivity, equity that has been put in SDG 4, the quality of education. And what are the factors that can contribute to this to ensure that the diversity, inclusivity, equity is achieved? One is we need to have common purpose. Okay, so I mean that the higher education institution ensure learners from all backgrounds are fully integrated, fully engaged, and fully empowered without any bias or prejudice. And the learners are able to find and invest support for their professional development and advancement is about the access to the opportunity. And then equitable recognition, I think we have to put in place equitable recognition, either financial or non-financial reward to the learners, not only to the learners, I think, to the teachers as well. And then the higher education has capacity to use all the diversity that they have into synergistic, impact on the education. Definitely, trust is very, very important, and we need to encourage that the learners experience being connected and accepted in the higher education, because when you go for online, I think sense of belonging is somehow affected through the online education. So we need to think how to do that. I think we have the way to do that. Learners are valued and successfully sailed across the program, considering the capacity, even though in the online. And the most important, I think, respect. Learners feel that they experience a culture of respect and civility for diverse perspectives and ways of knowing. I think these are the factors that is important for us to consider if you're looking at the diversity, inclusivity, equity perspective. And at the end, it's about purpose and vision, togetherness, and appreciation of our way of doing things. And before I conclude my presentation, I would like to share diversity, inclusivity, equity framework to humanize technology in higher education. So based on the diversity, inclusivity, equity, so I think I will be already aware of that. What do you mean by diversity, inclusivity, equity? So whatever the innovation and creativity from the technology must fit education purpose. So I think technology fit the education purpose is very important in the sense. And then whatever we are doing, we need to ensure that we create the right settings to celebrate and embrace the rich dimension of learners and teacher diversity. I think it is very, very important to ensure that we can move to the inclusivity, because inclusivity is about giving equal access to everyone to the opportunity and resources that are available for them to unleash the potential. And from there, you can always put certain strategies. Is only a few strategies that came from the literature, but you can always add on how this will ensure that equal opportunity for the student to success in their career afterward, or maybe in their life afterward. And at the end of the day, all learners are provided opportunity to unleash the potential so that they can carry out their responsibilities in the future. And I think the main message here is technology is a tool. Use it wisely to get the intended results. And we need to ensure that the technology will be able to articulate human intelligence in a proper way through the technology. Whatever the technology tools that we have, so that the human intelligence will be able to flourish in the future, is not diminished due to the technology. So in summary, that I can conclude here, change is inevitable because the pandemic and the technology have changed the whole landscape of higher education, basically transformed. In a way, it's a good transformation because we are now more engaged with technology and we know that how to use technology properly in certain contexts, but still we are learning to make it more efficient and more effective, but it will take time. And then digitalization is something that we need to embrace and need to look forward, because use technology wisely to humanize digitization of education, because if we use properly, digitization will lead to a betterment of our life and our higher education as well. And then the future ready, I think this is something that we need to be ready for the changing world. So I think we need to embrace enablers that will lead to the effectiveness of our higher education, and we need to embrace the strategies to ensure that whatever we do in the future is something will benefit to our future students, our future generations. And a DIE framework, I mean that diversity, inclusivity, and equity framework should be considered, because whenever we're thinking about the human, we need to ensure that all these DIE aspects will be put in place so that we can humanize technology in higher education rather than technology who are dictating us on what to do and what's not to do. I think, yeah, that's all from me. If you are interested to have my PowerPoint, you can download from the link. And if you have any question, you can ask, and I'm happy to take any question from you. Thank you so much.